In this video, we're going to learn the basics of JavaScript. Open Visual Studio Code and go to the Extensions tab. Search for Quokka.js and install this extension. Quokka will allow us to display the output of the JavaScript code easily in the editor itself. This will make the learning process easier and faster. Now close this tab and go back to the Explorer. Create a new file called playground.js. Before we start with the tutorial, I should mention a few things. First, this is a comment in JavaScript. You can write comments using // at the beginning. A comment has no effect over the code, and developers use it to explain the code. We also have console log. Console log allows us to read values from memory. We could read variables or values directly. So for example, we are reading the same value that we're typing here. This blue that you see here is coming from Quokka. And what Quokka does is remove the need for us to execute the code in the terminal. You may not know what the terminal is. Just know that for now, you would have to do the following if you wanted to read the values from console. You would type node playground.js and execute the file. This would require you to know what node is. You would have to install node. And so for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to skip that and just focus on the JavaScript. Later on, I will teach you what node is, how to install it, and how to use it. Now that we have set up our working environment, let's talk about variables. A variable is a symbolic name for a value stored in memory. We can declare variables in two ways in JavaScript. First, we have the let keyword to declare a block-scoped local variable, which we can optionally initialize to a value. In this case, we're declaring variable age and assign it a value of 22. We can also declare variables using the const keyword to declare block scope read-only named constants. And here we have declare color and assign it a value of pink, the string pink. When we declare variables, we are saving values in memory. So for example, we have saved this value 22 in memory, and we use age to refer to this value, to call it. This is, as we mentioned, a symbolic name that we provide. We could also declare variables using the var keyword, but the var keyword is no longer used because it makes the code more prone to error. Let and const were created to replace the var keyword. You may see some legacy code using the var keyword. For example, here we're declaring a variable size and assigning a value of 4. The name that we use to create a variable is called an identifier. For example, age is an identifier and color is an identifier. Size is also an identifier in this case. Identifiers have some rules. Within the allowed characters, we have uppercase letters A to Z, lowercase letters A to Z, and numbers 0 to 9. An identifier must start with a letter, or underscore, or a $sign. Lastly, an identifier cannot contain spaces or hyphen, also known as dash. Here are some invalid identifiers. First, we have the 3-size identifier, which is invalid because it starts with the number 3. We also have first dash name, which is invalid because an identifier cannot contain dash. And lastly, we have last name, which is invalid because we cannot have spaces in an identifier. Now let's look at some valid identifiers. We could have an all lowercase identifier. We could have a mixture of lowercase and uppercase letters. We can also include numbers in an identifier. We could also have really long identifiers. As we mentioned, we can also start identifiers with the $sign or an underscore. We should remember that JavaScript is a case-sensitive language, So the identifier price here is different from the identifier price with a capital E at the end. This can contain different values and work in the same JavaScript code. We use the camel case notation to name identifiers in JavaScript. To comply with the convention, you must make the first letter of the identifier lowercase and separate words by capitalizing the first letter of each word. Here are some incorrect examples using the camel case notation. First, we have my pencil, which is wrong because we're starting with the first letter uppercase. It should be my pencil like this, where the M is lowercase. We also have the green apple, which starts with the lowercase t, as expected, but we know that green and apple are two different words, so we should make the first letter of apple uppercase. It should be the green apple with an uppercase A. Some correct examples include my bike, final result, and time. As you can see, we always start with the lowercase letter, and if we have another word within the same identifier, we capitalize the first letter. When we assign a value to a variable, such value has a data type. Let's explore the primitive data types. First, we have the string data type. A string is a sequence of characters enclosed in single quotes or double quotes. For example, here I have declare my name and assign it a value of Pablo. I could also use double quotes here, but we'll use single quotes for now. Before we continue, let's press Command-Shift-P and type Quokka.js start on current file. This will start a Quokka.js server that will make it easier to explain and learn JavaScript. We could also see that we can start this using the command K followed by the letter Q. Let's start up Quokka. Now we see that Quokka has started down here. We can close this for now. Strings have a few properties. For example, we could combine strings using concatenation. If we see here, we have the full name, this is another constant, which is equal to the first name plus a blank space, an empty space, plus the last name. If we log the full name in the console, we could also use concatenation within the console log here. We would see the following message: Pablo Picasso painted this. So we took the first name, the last name, Pablo Picasso, and then we merged both of them in the full name. So full name is equal to Pablo Picasso. And then we created another string using concatenation, and we added painted this. So the full string would be Pablo Picasso painted this. We can use many different numbers in JavaScript. For now, let's just use some basic numbers. Later on, we'll explore numbers in more detail and we see which numbers are allowed in JavaScript. If you see, I have a 0, 2.49, -22, and 42. Next up, we have the Boolean data type, which is a logical data type which can only be true or false. So this can be true if we want it to be Boolean, or false. Next, we have the undefined data type. And as we explained previously, you can optionally set the value of a let variable. If you don't, JavaScript is gonna assign it a value of undefined. So if we see here, we're logging in the console the variable size, and we're getting undefined return. We could also explicitly set the undefined value. So for example, I'm creating a constant here, middle name, and assigning it a value of undefined. Same here with the name, making it equal to undefined. Lastly, we have the null data type, which indicates no value or the absence of a value. An array is an ordered list of values enclosed in square brackets and separated by comma. Each value in an array is an element. Here we have declare a new array, numbers. This array has 4 elements. The first element is the number 2. The second element is the number 1. Then 3, then 5. Elements in an array are referenced by their position in the array. Here we have a fruits array where the first element is apple and it has an index of 0. The second element is banana and it has an index of 1. We start counting from 0 from the leftmost item because arrays in JavaScript are 0 index, meaning although this is the first element, yes, it won't be index 1, it would be 0 because we start from 0. We can read values from an array using the bracket notation. Here we have the fruits array and we're reading the first element from the array. As we mentioned, the first element of the array has an index of 0, so we get apple. We can modify elements in an array by using the bracket notation. If we want to modify the second element from the measurements array, we use the bracket notation and put 1. Then we set the new value for the second element. If we log measurements in the console, we'll see that the first and third element did not change, but the second element changed from 3.14 to 2.22. Arrays are resizable, meaning we can change the length of the array. We can make it longer or shorter. In this case, we'll add a fourth element to the names array. We use the bracket notation to refer to the fourth element in the array, which has an index of 3, and add a value to that element. Now, if we log the names array in the console, we'll see that we have the same 3 values we had before, Juan, John, and Jeff, but in the modified array, we have Juan, John, Jeff, and Jose. Arrays can contain different JavaScript data types. In this random array example that we have, the first element is null, the second element is the string water, the third element is 3.14, then undefined, false, we have another array, A and B, and then we have an object. We can reference these values as we had done before. For example, if we want to get the first element, we do random 0. We can get the third element, the sixth element, and the seventh element. Now we're moving to objects. An object is a collection of key value pairs enclosed in curly braces. Here we have a vehicle object with 3 key value pairs. Keys are unique, meaning we cannot have the same key twice in the same object. First, we have the wheels key, which has a value of 4, the brand key, which has a value of Toyota, and the owner key, which has a value of null. To read values from an array, we use the bracket notation and the dot notation. The dot notation consists of typing the object followed by a dot, and then we type the property that we want to read. For example, here we have the author, but I could come in and check this to likes and get the value. I could change it to tags and get the value, and so on. We also have the bracket notation, which consists of typing the object followed by brackets, and within the brackets we call the key that we want to read. In this case we're reading likes, but we could read the title. And notice that this is a string. We could also pass in a variable inside the square brackets which contains the key that we want to read. So for example, here I'm reading the tags from the post object, but I could read the author, or I could read likes, and so on. We could also have nested objects in which we have an object, guy in this case, which has a key address, which is an object with 3 key value pairs. Let's see how we read information from this object. First, we could use the bracket notation to read, for example, the province. If we wanted to read the province here, we would do guy.address. So we're moving guy, and then we're going 1 level deep, which is address. We have in the same line, we have interest is bold, age, and so on. But we want to read the province. So we first reference the address and then we go another level and read the province. So we do guide.address.province, and this gives us New Oak. We also have the bracket notation. It works the same way we did before. We are simply chaining the keys that we want to read. So we have guide address province. We could also combine both notations. So for example, here I'm saying guide.address, then square brackets province. And here I'm doing it the other way around. So guide square brackets address dot province. Now we have this array here, an interest. So we want to read these values. How do we do this? We use a combination of dot notation and bracket notation. First, we have guide.interest, so that will take us to this point here. But then we want to read computers, which is the first element of the interest array. And remember, the first element has an index of 0, so we're doing interest 0. And have in mind that you cannot use the dot notation to read the index of an array. So for example, I couldn't say dot 0 here. That doesn't work. We can only use a bracket notation. We could also read it in this manner where we're only using the bracket notation. So guide interest 1, we're reading the second element. Another property of objects is that we can modify them. First, we can add values to an object. Here we're using the dot notation to add a new color key to the phone object, and we're setting it to black. If we log phone now in the console, we'll see that the object changed from this to this here. So we had two keys, brand and storage, and now we have a third one, color, black. We could also modify the key that we've just created. So for example, I'm changing the color from black to red. Now if we see the object, the color is red. We can also delete properties from an object. In this case, we'll delete in color. So if we log phone again, we'll get the same object that we had at the beginning with just two key pairs or two properties. Comments are usually used by developers to explain what the code does. In JavaScript, we can comment in two ways. We can have single line comments, which are created using the double slash. When we use the double slash, we also have the option to add the comment at the end of the statement. We can also write multi-line comments starting with slash asterisk and ending with asterisk slash. You may also see code written in JavaScript which includes a semicolon at the end of each statement. This is optional. You can add them if you want to, but JavaScript has something called automatic semicolon insertion, which will do this for you if you don't.